I hope no one here is in a hurry to begin. We have an abundance of time, or rather, the infinity of the present moment within you. Inner stillness and peace, that is what matters. Feel it within yourself now. Everything else is insignificant. Events on the surface of life. In themselves, they are not a problem. They become a problem when there is only the external level and you perceive nothing else. So, the essence of our meeting, the very heart, the essence of your life, is already here and now. There is no need for half an hour of preliminary explanations. No need for concepts or theories to add to your mind. The essence of our being here is to realize your own depth, which is sometimes called inner stillness or something else. Space, the spiritual dimension, the unconditioned, presence, and so on. Most people on the planet still do not have this. The number of those aware of the spiritual dimension is increasing, but of course, there is still a long way to go before everyone perceives the spiritual dimension. It is true that for most people, the path to awareness of their own depth passes through difficulties, but not for you, because most likely you have already had challenges in your life, which does not mean that they will not come again. But if they do come, they will not be so unbearable, because you have a background of space within you. You are able to interact with them. They no longer take hold of you completely. Last night, I was listening to the news. Now is a time of collective disasters in different parts of the world. One of them has recently occurred, and more are on the way. This means that in many regions, large numbers of people have gathered, and what at another time would have been a personal misfortune is now experienced collectively. Misfortune takes something from your life. It disrupts the order of things. Loss or death. What once formed the support of your life is suddenly taken away, and it is painful. But it is also a chance to realize the true foundation of your life, which you did not know before, which you had not noticed. What you took to be the foundation of your life was always unstable and impermanent. You simply did not know it. You were sitting on your shaky table, whatever it may have been, without knowing that it could break at any moment. Eventually, it does happen, but it could have broken at any time. When you see that what you took as support does not serve as the true foundation of your life, you understand this. Work and everything that gave you a sense of security, including pension funds and investments, do not last long. Everything appeared so fundamental. The next day you read the newspaper and suddenly realized that everything is unreliable. Or take physical objects. They seem so solid, yet a small disturbance, and they are gone. Your life, your so-called life, falls apart into pieces. And it is painful. I do not deny that it is painful, but it is an opportunity for a person to go deeper and realize their foundation. You can call it true security, which has nothing to do with the external expressions of life. It seems that most people need to experience misfortune in the form of loss in order for it to lead them to their depth. By their own will, they would not go there. And not everyone who experiences misfortune goes there. Some fall into reaction. They either become deeply embittered, "This is unfair. I did not deserve this," or they fall into despair. "I cannot go on and spend the next 5 years in sorrow." Both remain stuck in reaction. They become even more fixed in rigid patterns of behavior. But there is a chance that you will go deeper and let go of the search for something with which manifested form of life to identify yourself. Suddenly, deep within you, peace arises. You cannot give it a clear definition. Unexpectedly, you come into contact with something within yourself whose existence you did not know. Sometimes I call it the formless. One may call it spirit, because spirit has no form. Suddenly there comes a peace that surpasses all understanding. It cannot be explained, although I am trying now, but it is difficult. A person must be brought into their deep dimension through misfortune and difficulty. Depth is already here, in the present moment. Therefore, instead of being forced into it, since we have gathered here, we will go there willingly. Of course, we are not going anywhere. We will open ourselves to this dimension. A voluntary death. The death of the false I, which drew its sense of self from all kinds of manifested forms, primarily from thought forms. Because it is with thoughts that you primarily identify. A structure made of thoughts. You do not know things directly, they are first translated into a thought form. Before becoming part of your I, a car must be transformed into a thought form, into a mental concept. For example, you have a BMW. At first it is a pile of metal, but when it becomes a thought form, it is endowed with your I. It becomes part of what you think you are. That is how it works. And when your BMW is damaged, you lose your identification with it. One might easily object, I am not identified. I bought a car, say, for $100,000, but I am not identified with it at all. Perhaps so, but you will not know whether this is true until the car is damaged. Then it becomes clear whether you are identified or not. Misfortune is a test of whether something is connected to your I and how deeply. Another form of misfortune is not an earthquake. A more common form of misfortune is difficult people. If you look at your life, you will notice that other people are a significant source of problems. Earthquakes are relatively rare, but a milder form of misfortune is always here. An earthquake may happen once or twice in a lifetime and not even to everyone. But for every person, difficulties connected with other people are constant. It is impossible to get rid of them. If you manage to get away from one person, after some time others appear. They take on the same role as a source of trouble. The reason is that people are identified with the egoic I, with the surface, not with the essence of who they are. They do not know their essence. This is the main source of problems for themselves and for others. This is normal life. If you do not know who you are, you become a source of problems. You torment yourself at night and during the day. Wherever you go, you create problems for yourself and then become a source of problems for others. This is normal existence. The world revolves around this. Why? Because you do not know the essence of who you are. This is the source of trouble for all people, surely for you as well, to some degree. Or perhaps not. Perhaps all of this is already in the past for you. Perhaps you have already transcended all of this, like in that anecdote. An old lady, a pastor asks, I am not sure if I remember it correctly. The pastor addresses the congregation in church. Let us all forgive our enemies. Let us do it now. Perhaps there is someone who has not yet forgiven their enemies? An old lady raises her hand. You say to forgive your enemies, but I have none. Oh, that is wonderful. Please come up here, says the pastor. Here is a lady, she has no enemies. How did you manage that? What did you do? I outlived all those bitches. Of course, that is not transcendence. It is easy to deceive yourself into thinking that you have attained some kind of spiritual achievement. A good test is how you respond to difficulties. That is the indicator of your level of consciousness. You do not need to wait for an earthquake to find out where you are. But as I suggested, look at other people. To what extent are they a source of difficulty in your life? Yes, we are speaking about relationships. How much conflict is there in your life? Do not judge yourself, simply observe the degree of your reactivity to the often unreasonable behavior of others. How do you respond when something goes wrong? How dare he say that? Or in an ordinary discussion, you know the truth, and they do not. Or look at your life. For example, do you believe that you are always right in all areas of life, while others are always wrong? Ask yourself, how is it that I am always right, and others in my personal and professional life are always wrong? Interesting, I am always right. A certain doubt begins to arise in the mind. Perhaps something is not quite right here. Is it possible for a person to always be right? For that, I would have to be superhuman. You embody a certain point of view. You begin to see that, in dealing with your affairs and interacting with people, you are expressing your point of view, not the only one. At the moment of this realization, consciousness expands slightly. Now neither you nor others are always right. You have different perspectives on the same situation. Consciousness has expanded. Why? Because you are no longer identified with the thoughts that arise. Every opinion is a thought. If you are completely identified with a thought, you are possessed by it. The thought has you. You do not have thoughts. Thoughts have you. You are in your viewpoint, but you do not know it. That is why it is called unconsciousness. You are possessed by your opinion and therefore think you are always right. And suddenly you see this seeing happens together with a rise in consciousness. Unconditioned consciousness sees that which is conditioned. Presence, the light of consciousness. Suddenly you see this is part of awakening. Thus, difficulties, and in this case, conflicts with other people, can lead to awakening. You begin to observe yourself, your relationships. In general, one could say, the more conflict you have in your personal or professional life, the more unconscious you are. This is the basic principle, a wonderful measuring instrument, the level of conflict in your life. It is well said in A Course in Miracles. Although the text is written in the masculine form, wherever it says he, it should also be understood as she. Let us accept this limitation of form. No one who is at one with himself can even conceive of conflict. In other words, a situation never turns into conflict. It is simply a situation to be dealt with. Conflict means that you are caught in reaction. Then a simple situation becomes a conflict. Thus, the people who bother you in life are actually very useful, because they show you something about yourself. You could even thank all these, and, in the masculine version, idiots. The world is full of unconscious people, because they do not know who they are. So they play roles, or behave like fools. But it is not them, it is their behavior, arising from the false I, the compulsive maintenance of that I. A person reinforces it until, for example, an earthquake or some other disaster occurs. Something will happen, and then a chance appears. The rigid shell of the egoic I begins to crack. At first it is painful, then the crack widens. Whatever cracks open through that crack, light begins to enter. Misfortune. Many are born already into misfortune, each to a greater or lesser degree, because everyone is born into a particular situation with its own limitations placed upon the full expression of you as a life form. Life forms strive toward their full expression. At one time, I spoke about two movements of the universe. The first movement is toward the formation of forms. The universe seeks to know itself as form, and therefore it creates. How do I know this? Look around. You will see that the universe is constantly creating forms. Forms here, forms there. They are beautiful, almost unreal in appearance, yet they are real. They seem perfect, until you look more closely and notice certain imperfections, which indicate that the object is real. It is part of a higher perfection. If you look at our planet, at how life unfolds, not at what has already manifested, but at the ongoing flow of creation, the process of the formation of forms is not complete. Becoming continues. The incredible complexity of life forms even your own life. You grow and become an increasingly complex being. At first you are simple, then you become complex. Life becomes multi-layered. It seeks to express itself in forms. Much of life consists of unconscious processes, like in a dream. The universe dreams the dreams of forms. An immense inertia stands behind all of this. In the 19th century, the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer called it the will. This will lies behind the manifestation of all phenomena. It seeks to generate forms. But Schopenhauer did not express this clearly. He did not develop the idea fully, only briefly mentioning that there is another movement of the universe. I call it the return movement. The universe seeks to know itself as the formless. How do I know this? Because if you want to understand the universe, look deeply within yourself. There you will find all the answers about the history of the universe. You are a microscopic expression of the universe. As above, so below. In your own life, you can observe two movements. One, you strive to do something. You want to express yourself in form. You want to be a form. Here I am. This is what I do. This is what I can do. Look. There is also another movement within you, moving inward, not interested in creating or doing. It is interested in being. You want to do, and you want to be. The secret of life is to unite both. Most of the planet has lost itself in doing. A relatively small number of people are aware of the deeper, unconditioned dimension of life of being. Most people do not know who they are. They are constantly absorbed in doing, which consists of thinking and reacting. What's next? What should I do now? What should I think about? What do I need to react to? Where is the next? Who is going to bother me? What are we doing tonight? What should I do with my life? The world has lost itself, which is why the main emphasis of our teaching is on being. I do not deny that action plays a significant role in life, but at this time, to restore balance, it is more important that people be shown the way back into being, to the source of all life. The timeless, formless source of all life, sometimes called God. But I do not use that word, it has become too worn. Thus, you want to realize God, and you also want to do something. The life of forms, unfolding in time, and the one formless life that is, that was not and will not be, but eternally is, and has nothing to do with time. Eternal, timeless, that is your essence. The understanding of this is what, as I see it, is needed now on this planet. Not an increase in the ability to act, because we are already very good at doing. So good that we may soon destroy the planet and ourselves. That is how good we are as doers. What matters now is to find balance, to find the source from which everything arises. The movement home, the return as we said, the movement outward, into action, into form, and the return movement to the one. Your life flourishes when it expresses both, while you are here on earth as a temporary physical form. Of course, you are much more than that. The words I use are terribly inadequate. Everything is so vast, so magnificent. It is impossible to express truth in words only an approximation. When you understand the limitations of words, that is already good, otherwise they may lead you astray if you begin to believe every word literally. Words are only pointers, almost like in a poetic text. When Jesus Christ taught, he would say, "The kingdom of heaven is like," and then move to another metaphor. "It is like this," and so on. Always metaphors, because it cannot be pointed to directly, only a sketch, an outline, a small indication. It is like that within you. I am certain of this. Everyone knows these two movements. But the fact that you are here is a sign that the return movement of the universe in your life has become more important. I am not calling you to give up doing. No, of course not. You still want to act, but you recognize the profound importance of being. When I say you, I mean something within you that is far beyond the person. The totality of being moves through you, because there is no you, and the universe as separate. You are the universe. It is very easy to fall into a false concept, I in the universe. Here is I, and there is the rest of the world. This is a mistaken perception of yourself as a separate entity somehow placed into the universe. Long ago, there was an English comedy series, Mr. Bean. At the beginning of each episode, we saw him falling from the sky onto the ground. Suddenly, he finds himself in this world. You fall into a spotlight. Light pours down on you from above. You stand up and do not know where to go, this way or that. A beautiful metaphor for how a human being perceives themselves. Existentialist philosophers spoke of being thrown into this world. And what are you to do with yourself now? Of course, you are not thrown into this world because you are this world. You are the universe. You were not placed into it, you emerged from it, and then you return to it. There is no separation between you and the universe. Everything that happens to you happens to the universe. You are it. And yet it is very easy to misperceive yourself. Thus, difficulties lead you to disidentify from everything that has form. Another role of difficulty: it increases your capacity to create forms. Difficulties simultaneously help you realize who you are beyond form, and at the same time strengthen your ability to generate form. There is an ancient Latin saying, many know it, per aspera ad astra, through hardships to the stars. It is also said, what does not kill me makes me stronger. Indeed, there are many examples. I was told, though I do not know whether it is entirely accurate, that when planting certain garden seedlings, instead of allowing them to grow quickly upward in warm air, they are covered with soil to make them more resilient. The layer of soil above the sprout forces it to generate more energy. All energy arises from the unmanifested source, from being. The sprout pushes through the barrier, and you get stronger plants. Most of us encounter difficulties early in life. Many of you were born into families with limited means, or even into dysfunctional families. This is very common. In fact, it is difficult to find a family that is not dysfunctional, is it not? You are born into a set of limitations. Perhaps something is not right with the body, something congenital, or a physical defect occurred. Many already in childhood face extreme limitations. Some break through them. They generate energy. You are a form that seeks to express itself. For example, a boy is bullied at school. He enrolls in a martial arts school. There is even a film about this. In the end, he generates so much energy that he overcomes the bullies who are physically much stronger than he is. This is one way of overcoming, generating additional energy so that the life form can express itself more fully. There is another way to take an indirect path. Someone may not be able to go into martial arts. They do not have the physical qualities for it. Then they focus on intellectual or other achievements and become a master in that domain. 10 years later, they meet the bully, who is working as an assistant at a gas station and now parks their car. In this way, difficulty has generated energy. The danger is that you begin to identify yourself with this additional energy, and this strengthens your egoic I. That danger is always there. Energy flows into you. Your capacity to create increases. You say, and this is I. In this way, you falsely perceive yourself as a separate entity, or as some achievement, or as the ability to produce something. You identify with it. It becomes your I. You feel bigger. You carry an image of yourself in your mind. This is who I am. In other words, you have a strong ego. The stronger your ego, the more it begins to generate problems for you, meaning, once again, difficulties. Sometimes a person's development consists in creating difficulties for themselves and then generating energy to overcome them in one way or another. Creative energy enters their life, but they do not realize that total creative energy is not personal. People identify themselves with the creative process, with their actions, and with what they create. My company, my reputation, my anything, as long as it is mine. The ego grows and inevitably brings more difficulties, numerous conflicts, pressures from different sides, pulled this way and that, and there is no possibility to take the next step and discover who you are beyond form. Very often, the difficulties we are speaking about today are created by the person themselves. Other difficulties may seem to come from outside, but if you look closely, you will notice that most of them are generated from within, moving outward. Problems arise because the egoic I is strong, and it adds its reactions to ordinary situations. You will see this everywhere if you observe people. Difficulties appear in your life. They can be recognized simply as a situation to be dealt with. Then an egoic reaction arises against what is, and your reaction is falsely taken to be part of the circumstances. In other words, you do not separate the situation from your reaction to it. You perceive it all as one. There could be countless examples. A very simple one is reactions to the weather. Another terrible day. You mix your reaction into a simple fact. It is raining. Without realizing that the day itself is not terrible, your reaction is, there is nothing terrible about the rain. Your reaction declares that it is terrible, and the rain becomes terrible. You do not separate the fact from what you add to it. These are the difficulties you create yourself. Speaking of other people who enter your life, you are dissatisfied with them. You complain about them to yourself and to others. He said this, he did that. I will never trust his words again. You add unnecessary mental noise. Each person acts according to their level of consciousness. It cannot be otherwise. But your judgment of others is what you add. Believing every judgment that arises in the mind creates many difficulties and conflicts, because you interact with people as if your judgment were the truth. This is a tremendous source of conflict. Self-created difficulties arise from identification with every thought. Eventually, this leads to more and more conflict. Life becomes increasingly unpleasant. In extreme cases, you find yourself in one lawsuit after another, or in some countries, instead of legal disputes, people carry a gun, hoping to shoot first, and this is considered normal. There is always the assumption that the other is wrong. The other must be the one at fault. Earlier, I spoke of the position, I am always right. There is only one mental stance more harmful, more destructive than I am always right. It is, we are always right. The plural we is worse than the singular I. The I itself is already unconscious enough, but we is a far greater unconsciousness than the individual ego. The harm and suffering inflicted on others from the illusion of the I are nothing compared to the suffering caused by the false we. At times, someone may kill another person because of their unhealthy ego, but this is nothing compared to the millions who have been killed because of we are right. The illusion we possess the truth, translated into meaning, implies we possess your mind. From this collective unconsciousness, an enormous amount of suffering constantly arises on the planet. It is a far greater source of misery than any natural disaster. Consider the number of victims of natural events and compare it to those killed by humans, even just in the 20th century. Such is the state of humanity. This is why awakening is so necessary, and it is happening. Corrective consciousness, or rather, corrective unconsciousness, is unhealthy. All of this is part of a much larger picture, the evolution of consciousness. The egoic I has reached a point of madness. But we must recognize how much suffering is generated from the state of we. Again, most of the suffering experienced by humanity is created by humanity itself. Suffering is produced both collectively and individually. At the moment of this realization, something simple happens. I have spoken of this before. When you ask the question, why am I always right? You become more attentive. You begin to see how you identify with every thought that arises, without realizing that thoughts are only a single perspective, not the fullness of truth. Then disidentification from thought occurs. What comes in its place? Intelligence. True intelligence. Thought is very limited. We call it intellect, but in fact many thoughts are simply foolish. It is good that there is something beyond thought. Thought then comes into the service of true intelligence, because by itself it is a rather insane mechanism when we are not aware of the source from which it arises. When there is only thought, thinking quickly becomes dysfunctional. Then comes destructive behavior and distortion of the perception of reality. You interact with the world through a layer of judgments. You do not see reality. You see a layer of judgments through which you interpret reality. This is what happens when there is no depth of awareness. Thus, thought in the absence of consciousness is essentially insane. Therefore, increasing the capacity to think does not solve anything. Expanding intellectual inquiry in various fields will not solve anything. Thinking itself is wonderful, but first, you need essential intelligence. Then thinking begins to express that intelligence. Consciousness begins to take form. You awaken from identification with the mind. That is what happens. That is why we are here. Not because we are planning to do something in the future, but because everything happens here and now. Awakening is now, here. It is not a future event. Oh, I like the idea of awakening. It must be something great, people ask. Tell me, what is awakening like? How do awakened people perceive life? Why ask this question? Awaken now and you will know. Why should I tell you? Sit and become inwardly still, present, spacious. That is all. You do not need to ask what it is like. This is what it is. When will I become enlightened? This is it. So, the difficulties you create for yourself generate suffering. Strangely, there comes a moment when suffering begins to awaken you. The difficulties you create for yourself are, in fact, part of the process of awakening. Everything makes sense. The ego, yes. All of this is part of the process of awakening. There is no need to strain yourself thinking, all right, but how do I understand all this? There is nothing complicated. But of course, you can make it complicated if you want. It is very easy to see how the suffering you create for yourself eventually awakens you, but awakening will take a long time unless you discover within yourself a small crack and unexpectedly come across a spiritual teaching. You open a book and suddenly, oh. Or you hear a fragment of a teaching somewhere and again, oh. Eventually, you may awaken anyway, but the process can take a long time. A spiritual teaching accelerates time until you realize that you do not need time to be present. It is sometimes said, you need time to understand that you do not need time. So, difficulties can almost be welcome depending on the degree to which they enter your life. In a very mild form or in a more pronounced one. I have already said, the way you respond reveals your state of consciousness. A small inconvenience or an earthquake, someone scratched your car, or you lost your job, or you invested money with Bernard Madoff. Whatever form difficulty takes, you have two paths. Either you generate energy. For example, you lost your job. Like many people, you are going through what is called a recession. You are without work, and you are not sure to what extent it supported your sense of I, your false I. Let us note in passing, the degree to which your job supported your false I determines how lost you feel. Money is running out. How will I live for the next few months? Will I be able to pay the rent? Yes, you can generate energy from this situation. If you do not give in to fear, you can enter a state of alertness. From this alertness, first of all, alertness itself is an aspect of the unconditioned. In the moment of alertness, you are not thinking. You are in awakened presence. There is no fear here. In alertness, you are present. Most people do not like uncertainty. What will happen to me? They do not like not knowing how they will live next week. But if you can embrace this uncertainty with your attention, without demanding, my life must be safe, if you allow uncertainty to be part of your life, because if everything were known in advance, you could become almost dead. You know that you will retire at 63, receive a good pension, and then someday die. I want another 20 years of safe work. Then I will retire. Everything is going according to plan. My life is insured. Everything is in place. Nothing to worry about. Every day, you go to the same safe job. You park your car, sit at the computer, answer phone calls, schedule meetings, go home. Complete security. Everything is wonderful. Even your vacation is safe. Everything is packaged. No uncertainty. You do not travel to Mexico. It is unstable there now. You go somewhere else, where it is safe. You feel protected as you are driven from the airport to the hotel, then back to work. Thanksgiving, Christmas, then another Christmas. Your 20 years pass. Time to retire. You move to Palm Springs, sit in the sun. This is roughly what the desired life looks like. You are completely safe. Well, have you awakened? What? I have seen so much on TV. They never said anything about awakening there. Instead of insecurity, complete security. This is what many people strive for. But what is it that you truly want? To be who you are in your essential depth? Do you want that? Then insecurity comes. You accept it. Okay, I do not know what will happen. You do not recoil. Oh no, I do not know what will happen to me now. Simply, I do not know what will happen. Total openness. In the moment of complete acceptance of uncertainty, the fear that was there before transforms into alertness. Thus, accepted uncertainty gives rise to a heightened state of presence alertness. I, too, sitting on a park bench, often did not know how I would live the next day. A bird flies by, a tree alertness. At the last moment, something would always happen that supported me as a physical form. What matters is that uncertainty, If you accept it, heightens alertness, gives rise to presence. You become more present because you do not know the future. There is beauty in this. If there were complete security, a job, a planned retirement, and so on, you would most likely fall into a kind of sleep. On the other hand, even in total security, a doctor may say, "I have bad news for you. I thought that everything in my life was safe, and perhaps even my God, but anything can happen." Another opportunity arises to become present because you do not know whether you will be alive in a few years. Frightening thoughts. I have seen people with serious diagnoses. This thought either brought them into the present or made them very unhappy. Yet there is the possibility that this thought pushes you inward. Suddenly, grace blossoms. The little person wants to survive as a little person but cannot. Total insecurity for the little person. Do not deceive yourself, total insecurity. And suddenly you realize who you are beyond the little person. An increased flow of life energy begins to move through your form. You cannot define what is happening. It is I, of course, but something far deeper, far more vast than the little I. Whether any activity will arise from this alertness, we do not know. We must see. Perhaps it is enough for the universe to manifest through you as a form and simply radiate presence. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is what the universe wanted. Your life is fulfilled. You do not need another 20 or 30 years. Your life is fulfilled even if nothing happens beyond the ordinary daily events I spoke of earlier. Waiting for the next interesting program on TV or waiting for something online, why would you need another 20 years of the same? But suddenly something happens within you, and the universe blossoms. Consciousness enters this world through you, and that is enough. If you are meant to have another 20 years, perhaps you will create something from your presence. Creative ideas may come to you unexpectedly. You may initiate new things. This is wonderful, but it is secondary. Being comes first. So, we welcome whatever life brings. It is an opportunity either for awakening or for the deepening of awakening, if it has already occurred. I can predict. I do not often make predictions, since I am not interested in the future, but I can say this. Whatever misfortune now comes into your life, it will lead you into deeper presence. Therein lies the beauty. The deepening of presence means the diminishing of the person. The mind-created entity, once so solid, almost impenetrable, becomes transparent, relatively insignificant. Consciousness shines through more and more. Unconditioned consciousness shines through conditioned forms, that is, through consciousness that has taken form and thus become limited. And yet all of this is consciousness. Ah, how good. At last, you can say that life is beautiful without deceiving yourself, without assuming that the things around you will remain with you or that your body will be with you forever. Life is good not because you have plans for retirement, for a house, or for work. There is a deeper reason why life is beautiful, and that reason includes what is called the bad. I call it a good beyond good and evil, beyond what is good and bad, a greater good. Romantic love. My question concerns personal romantic love. From books, I know that romantic love can feel like a vital necessity. I need you. An expectation of certain behavior from the other person. But there is also impersonal, unconditional love, in which there are no behavioral expectations. My question is, if a person is in a surrendered state of consciousness, if they are at peace with what is, can they still experience romantic love toward a particular person? Or does the personal dissolve completely, leaving only universal love, which is, of course, beautiful? Thank you. In essence, you are asking whether you will love everyone equally, without singling anyone out as special. In A Course in Miracles, this is called special relationships, and they arise from the ego. If you choose a special person and see in her or in him only form, I do not mean only the physical form, which is, of course, also important, since it is part of sexual attraction. But this also includes the psychological form of the other, how you perceive the person, how they speak, act, behave. All of this is also form a psychological form. A strong attachment can arise to both the physical and psychological aspects of form, including emotional attachment. When all these components come together in one point, you fall in love, or literally, you fall into love. You fall into love. It is well said, a fall in the level of consciousness. If you are experiencing something like this now, all is well. Life wants you to go through this experience. This fall in your consciousness is part of your learning process. Of course, falling in love does not immediately feel like a fall. On the contrary, at first you feel uplifted, and only later do you realize, oh, so that was a fall. The fall may occur a year after the honeymoon, or soon after you begin living together. Instead of love, suffering arises. Or your relationship, this also happens, oscillates between love and suffering for 1, 2, or 3 years, and eventually, usually comes to an end. Or you find a compromise and remain together. The ability to sense in another. First of all, of course, in yourself. The formless, the being, the inner stillness, presence, whatever we may call it. Sensing this within yourself, being it, you begin to recognize it in another. The recognition of the nature of being in the space of stillness is true love, which does not need the other, for the other only reflects what you are. But you are not only the formless, you are also form, a man or a woman. For a time, you have a male or female body with its emotional field. You may discover that your form, on certain levels, emotional, sexual, psychological, resonates with another form. In unconscious romantic relationships, there is nothing but such resonance. When you know who you are in your essence, all the factors of form, the physical, the emotional resonance remain, but the relationship is no longer limited to them, because a deeper level is present at the same time. You can move through all the stages of romantic love without losing awareness of the transcendent dimension both in yourself and in the other person. For true depth in any relationship, full awakening is not necessary, but some element of transcendence, of formlessness, is essential. Otherwise, the relationship will not endure. For otherwise, all that remains in such a relationship is judgment about each other, physical, mental, and emotional attachment. If you sense your transcendent level, you can feel completely fulfilled even without romantic relationships. You do not say, I need a love affair. If a romantic relationship is present, wonderful, but there is no painful need for it. Often, thinking interferes with the expression of the deeper, formless level in relationships. Identification with mental stories about yourself and about the other person quite often obscures true love. The mind may even declare, there is no love. Last year, I read a wonderful novel by the contemporary British writer Ian McEwan on Chesil Beach. 2 young people fell in love. It took place in England in the 1950s. A young man and a young woman felt a strong attraction to each other. They fell in love. But sexually, they were extremely constrained, uninformed, even fearful. It was the 1950s. The sexual revolution had not yet happened. In short, they married and stayed in a small seaside motel in the south of England. On their first wedding night, something terrible happened, a real catastrophe. The young woman was so shocked that she ran out of the motel and fled to the beach. The two of them were unable to treat what happened as something somewhat comical. I will not tell you what the catastrophe was. You can read it yourself. In short, she ran away. The next morning, he found her on the beach. They spoke for a long time, still feeling a strong attraction toward each other, but their minds began to create frightening stories about why it was impossible to continue their relationship. The young couple projected their fears onto each other, and these imagined stories completely cut them off from one another. They separated. They spent the rest of their lives apart, each going their own way. In the novel, this period is condensed into 5 or 6 pages. The book shows how destructive the mind can be for true relationships, and how thinking imposes its deeply flawed interpretations of the partner. As Don Miguel Ruiz might say, so much belief is invested in these illusions that a person loses the ability to see how the mind creates false judgments that build a barrier between you and the other. Ian McEwan is not a spiritual author in the strict sense of the word. He simply observed the nature of the human mind and presented us with his insight. And so, in the end, his message is spiritual.